I left a little cliffhanger there where I was like, "Hey, it's great, it's great." It is. It does absolutely improve performance. But
Yeah, straight A student, but I'm friends with the cool kids. Following the rules and the rubric. Freestyle on the bus.
4 days out, have not done a lot in the last 2 weeks, which is all part of the plan.
yeah,
So, but you definitely get that, like, they call it like taper anxiety, where like you kind of think that you forget how to swim, bike, and run, even though you spent the last 12 weeks doing a lot of those things.
yeah.
So you just gotta kind of try to lean on the training that you've already done and trust the process. But I've been checking the weather in Panama City Beach maybe once every 3 hours
And what's it
just
looking
to make
like?
sure it's going to be nice. We're looking to start the morning in like the high 50s, and then it's going
That's
to peak
perfect.
at like 75.
Oh, that's perfect. That's a good
Yeah,
range.
not bad at all. So I'm pretty excited.
Nice. Let's go. Let's go.
No,
I
no
can't wait
weather
to hear about it.
excuses. So it's going to be
Do you
awesome.
do you have a link yet? Like where I can
It's
follow
this,
along?
it's the same app. I won't get my bib until the day before, and then I'll
Okay.
send you the number. You can load it up.
All right, please don't forget. One other thing I wanted to get into before we got rolling with our question here, since you claim to be our resident NBA expert, I don't know what's going on with this cheating scandal, or the betting
Oh my
scandal. I'm
goodness.
sorry. So can you explain it to me? Like I know, like surface level,
Like,
Chauncey Billups,
yes,
Terry Rozier, in trouble, bad things, but like, can you explain to me more in depth what's going on?
but do you know about Pookie, Doc, and Albanian Bruce?
No, I don't.
Okay,
I
so
don't have social media and I don't watch like ESPN or anything, so like I'm
yeah.
very, very out of the loop.
So there's two separate scandals that we seem to be finding. There's the Terry Rozier, Chauncey Billups, and then Deontay Porter from last year, who actually is now banned from the NBA. And that is where these players are taking their individual props, like their point totals, their rebound totals, assists, and taking the under. And so Terry Rozier, there's like video evidence of the moment that he took himself out of a game in which he bet on the under on himself. So he comes down, scores a mid-range bucket, looks like Terry Rozier, a very, very good like role player. He just signed to the Heat, and everyone was really excited about that. Like he was going to come in and actually make an impact. He
Mhm.
comes back on defense, starts touching his foot, asks to come out of the game, doesn't play the rest of the game. And so when the NBA initially looked into this, they got a tip that maybe Terry Rozier was betting on himself. They cleared him, but the FBI came back and said no. So they found this. I don't know what their evidence is. They haven't released all the details, but this indisputable evidence that he had been taking the unders on himself, which I personally think is really soft.
Oh
But
yeah.
like that's horrible. So takes the under on himself and then pulls himself out of the game to cash out, make a little extra money, or help his friends make a little extra money. And then the Chauncey Billups side is back in, I believe it was 2022, when he was the head coach of the Trailblazers. There was a stretch where they were tanking for the Scoot Henderson pick. And so what they did is he knew when they were going to start sitting Damian Lillard to try to lose games. Because, I mean, Dame's one of the best players in the league. You take him out to lose games.
Mhm.
So what he did is he told all of his friends and his informants or whatever you want to call them to bet the unders on the like Blazers point totals or just take the under on their wins for the rest of the season, knowing that they were going to be tanking before everyone else did. So that's one side of this scandal. The
Okay.
other side, which only involves Chauncey Billups, to my knowledge, is an underground secret poker ring. And this is where Albanian Bruce, Doc, and Pookie come in. There's this list of these like 20 guys who are all involved. And it's literally like Pookie, Doc, Albanian Bruce, Black Tony, Chauncey Billups. And it's all of these like mobster nicknames and then an NBA great. And so it involved these marked cards, x-ray machines in the tables, and then like contact lenses that could see the marked cards. So that way they would be able to win like their hands. It's like the FBI stumbled into this from like the NBA betting scandals. It's unreal.
Is there any insight or like um thought on what their motives are here? Because it cannot be strictly money alone. I don't know, and this might be a wrong figure, but didn't Terry Rozier like have like $160 million in career earnings thus far? And I know
I'm looking
Chauncey
at his
Billups got paid
current
during his
contract.
day.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so Terry Rozier just signed a $26.2 million contract, and he's on the tail end of his career. So I have a feeling he's probably doing fine money-wise. My guess is
Okay.
that it's outside sources pressuring them to try to get in on the game. And yeah, Terry Rozier career earnings $160 million.
That's
Really don't need to be making a
uh,
couple 100,000.
no, it's just like there's and I mean, I could be grossly wrong about this, but I listen to a lot of podcasts with a lot of very wealthy people for the entrepreneurial side of my life. Like I run a business, and so I want to learn from people who run successful businesses. And a common theme is like, if you make $100 million, you're not going to be able to spend that much money in your lifetime. Like it's going to be really hard to have a meaningful um or spend that money on meaningful things. And so like $160 million, like I just don't see the ROI of ever getting even close to any sort of cheating scandal. Like it just doesn't make sense to me whatsoever. And then Chauncey Billups, like, I mean, what did he make in his career? Like I'm gonna look that up. Total
Gotta be
career
a
earnings
lot.
$106 million. So he's also over $100 million in his
Yeah.
oh wait, that was during his playing days. And so
Oh,
he's
yeah. That's
still
before he even started coaching.
so he's still what, probably like $2.5 million a year contract right now,
Yeah.
something like that?
At least.
Oh, I
And
don't know. I
the
just don't
thing with
understand it.
it doesn't make any sense. And the thing with the poker side too is he wasn't even like really involved. I just learned this term. He was called a face card, which was basically like a celebrity or like wealthy individual who's used to attract other celebrities and wealthy individuals into the game to get scammed by Albanian Bruce, which I just think is which implies that there was a Bruce who wasn't Albanian. And I just think that's an awesome way to get your nickname.
That is crazy. That is crazy.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to something that Albanian Bruce does not have any insider knowledge on, and maybe he does. Maybe I'm underestimating Albanian Bruce's knowledge base here. But I want to talk about supplementation. So this has been like a hotbed topic, and I did not realize how much of a hotbed topic it is with our teenage athletes. And so I really want to address this head on. And I can't say I'm excited about talking about it. It doesn't fire me up. It's not my area where I get super interested in, but obviously it's a high demand, a high need, a high interest topic. And so we really got to talk about this stuff because it is a problem. Some people are taking some stuff that's absolutely outrageous. Some people are taking some stuff that's just a waste of their money. Some people are taking some solid stuff. Some people are taking some solid general products. I'm sorry, some general supplements, but they're taking the wrong products because they're not certified, whatever it is. And so we really got to dive deep in here. And we need some science to give us some good answers here, Mr. John.
Yeah, I think recently being in high school locker rooms, and I think even worse, college gym locker rooms, people take some crazy stuff that they have absolutely no idea what is actually the effect that it is having on their body. So I'm looking forward to getting into this.
So I wouldn't actually go a little bit further there. What have you seen? What are people regularly taking? I didn't realize how prevalent ashwagandha was with our high school
Mhm.
athletes. There are some other ones, but I want to hear from you. Like, what are you regularly seeing people take?
Yeah, I would say ashwagandha is a really big one that I never really heard of in high school, never really thought of taking. Um, a lot of people are taking these like just absurd pre-workouts with you look at the ingredient list and I could not spell or say a single word on there. They're taking creatine, which I think innately, which I think we're going to talk about here a little bit more, but you'd be interested to see how much of it isn't the monohydrate version, which to me in my mind is like the only version that I always expect to see. And then once you get into kind of some of the backwards stalls of the college locker rooms, you see some guys just straight up taking steroids, which at 18, 20 years old feels like a crazy thing to me. But that I think was the biggest shock is these guys who aren't that big. If to me, it always felt like someone who had maxed out their natural capacity is going to now take steroids to get past that. These guys are smaller than I am, and they are shooting up their testosterone.
Yeah, so maybe that's actually a route we're gonna have to go here in the next several weeks and actually talk about like what these long-term costs are of some of those more intense PEDs. So like what actually, if you're on anabolic steroids, if you're taking testosterone, what does that actually look like down the road? So that way when these kids go off to college and they have a little bit more autonomy and they're faced with these things, they actually understand what's going on with them instead of just having some TikTok bro telling them it's safe, it's fine. They just their test is naturally low and they need to have some more testosterone, whatever it is. But there's just really bad information out there right now, and so we got to dive into the science. Before we dive into all the supplement stuff in general, I want to make sure that we address the biggest elephant in the room, the thing that we need to talk about, and that's the fact that the FDA does not regulate supplements. And so what that means is I could call some manufacturer today and I could tell them I want X, Y, and Z in the supplement, and then I could create a different label and then put that label on the supplement and sell it to you online via Shopify. I could maybe, if I'm good at retail, I could get on the shelves and I could have a supplement that has very different ingredients actually inside of it than what it says on the label. Now, sometimes it's done nefariously, like I just talked about, and sometimes it's just done because the manufacturing process is janky and things sneak into there. But the FDA does not regulate this stuff. So you have no way of knowing what's actually in your supplement unless you have it third party tested. And so, as an athlete, there are two different companies or two different labels that you want to look for. One is NSF Certified for Sport. So, that is the biggest name in the certifying. There you go. Perfect. John's pulling it up for you right there. The NSF Certified for Sport label. That's the biggest name. The one that you'll always hear. NCAA really highly recommends NSF Certified for Sport stuff. So if it's NSF Certified for Sport, you know that what has happened is every batch that that company makes of their product, they send some of it, they send a sample over to NSF. Their labs test it for a giant list of banned substances to make sure that what they say is in the product is actually what's in the product. Same thing. The other label you can look for that's gained a lot of popularity and is trustworthy is the informed sport or informed choice, informed for sport, whatever it is. Yeah, informed choice label right there. That also is another third party organization that you know is testing your supplements to make sure that what they say is in there is what actually is in there. If you don't look for that, you have no idea what's going on. It more often than not, if you see your favorite players test positive for PEDs, most of the time it's not because they're out there intentionally taking something that they were trying to cheat with. Obviously, yes, that happens. Some people are just trying to gain any edge they can and they knowingly take PEDs and try to get away with it. But more often than not, it's just a professional athlete has this trainer or has this friend or has this whoever who says, you know what, bro, you should take this. It really helps you out with XYZ. You know what, bro, you should really take this. And they just take a supplement because they're trying to fix a problem. They think that it's fine. And maybe, you know, the supplement that they think they're supposed to be taking, maybe they're taking, I don't know, we talked about ashwagandha a little bit. Maybe they think they're taking ashwagandha and maybe they are taking ashwagandha, and ashwagandha is fine from an NCAA standpoint. I don't know if it is or isn't, so I have no idea about ashwagandha right now. That's going to be a future episode. But maybe ashwagandha is fine for them to take from an NCAA or professional athlete standpoint, but the supplement they take isn't certified by a third party, and so it has some other stuff in there as well, and they test positive for PEDs, and they figure out why it is on the back end. So regardless, whatever you do, make sure your supplement is third-party tested by Informed Choice or NSF. So the question we're presented with today is, should my athlete or should I take creatine? And that question then splits up into something that we can actually research by saying, is creatine safe and is creatine efficacious? Efficacious would split into all the different subcategories of what outcomes are you trying to influence. And so if you're trying to sprint faster, does creatine help me jump fast or run faster? Jump higher, same thing. Does it help me gain more muscle? So muscle hypertrophy. Could be, does it help me from an endurance running standpoint? So we have all these different questions that are under the umbrella of, is it efficacious? So we're taking the question, should I take creatine or should my athlete take creatine, and dividing it into all of those different questions and trying to find the answers for it from that standpoint. Before we get into the research, I want to talk about what just creatine is, so we have an understanding of why you would even consider taking this in the first place. And before we talk about what creatine is, we need to talk about how the body creates energy, or how the body uses energy, because that's the whole impetus for why we would want to take creatine in the first place. So, how knowledgeable do you feel about this stuff before I go back and forth with you here, Joel?
I'm going to ATP synthase and glycolysis right now. So that's where my head's at.
Okay. Within your body, we have something called ATP, so adenosine triphosphate. That is our energy currency. You can think of it like a dollar that you exchange for energy. So if you want your muscle to contract, you have to give it ATP. If you want your nerves to send a signal, you have to give it ATP. So essentially your body says, oh, you want to contract that muscle? Give me some ATP. You want to send that nerve signal? Give me some ATP. Do you want to do that cell function? Give me some ATP. So we need to have ATP in order to be able to do basically anything. And our body has three main pathways to be able to make this energy currency, to make this ATP. You have the aerobic system, the anaerobic glycolytic system, and the phosphocreatine system. The phosphocreatine system is what we're specifically looking at here. When we need rapid energy, like a short sprint, a heavy lift, or an explosive jump, we rely on that phosphocreatine system. We store phosphocreatine right in our muscles so that it's ready to use in a moment's notice. However, the phosphocreatine system burns out pretty quickly with the limited stores of phosphocreatine in the body. So our body naturally makes creatine, and then we get some more of it through our diet. So if you eat a lot of red meat or fish, you're going to get a lot of creatine in your diet. However, supplementing with additional creatine can raise the amount of phosphocreatine that is stored in your muscle. So you have greater stores of phosphocreatine. The more phosphocreatine that is stored, the longer that phosphocreatine energy system can be used. Because our phosphocreatine system is great at fueling high intensity explosive exercise, making this system more efficient allows us to have higher quality, high intensity training sessions for a longer period of time. So if you have more high quality, more high intensity training, you get better training results and better outcomes. Any thoughts so far, John, on all that?
I mean, yeah, I feel like I've been taken back to high school biology, talking about glycolysis in the Krebs cycle. But now that we have this creatine in our body, we're able to perform these fast sprints. We're able to perform all these amazing Olympic feats of jumping, sprinting, lifting heavy. Why would we not add more of that into our body is kind of my question.
Yeah, and so that then becomes the question we're searching after today. So does supplementing with more creatine actually result in higher creatine stores within your muscle? And then does that result in all of the performance metrics that we think on the surface with our physiological mechanisms or physiological understandings? It doesn't do what we think it's going to do. So that takes us to our literature now. That takes us to our studies. And before we get into our actual what does the science say, I want to do a quick breakdown of the different types of literature that exist out there. So that way we are all on the same page as we go over all this stuff, because you can make data say whatever you want it to say. I get people who send me studies all the time and they're just absolutely junk. We need to make sure that what we're looking at is high quality, and we need to learn how to appraise literature. We need to learn how to appraise science and actually go through the scientific process. And we're going to make it fun and exciting and not boring, but I do want to make sure you guys understand how to actually think for yourselves throughout this process. So the highest quality research that we could possibly have is a systematic review or meta-analysis, because what that is it's a study of studies. So it takes all of the different studies that exist out there from these subcategories, and then it brings them all together and combines them for one synthesized understanding of what the current state of literature is. So because it combines all of the different other studies, that makes it our highest quality study out there. We want these reviews preferably to be systematic versus just straight up lit reviews or narrative reviews, because the systematic process tells us that we could repeat the same exact methods they used in that study and come up with the same exact studies and have the same results. If you just do a regular lit review or narrative review, you have more possibility for bias because you're not using a systematized approach to find all the literature that's involved in it. A meta-analysis is just kind of a way that they take all of those other studies and they come up with one combined data metric through all of that. Underneath that, we have experimental studies. So if you're looking at one specific study, this is the highest quality individual study you could have, something that is experimental, a randomized control trial. That's where you have two groups of different people. You randomly assort those people into those groups. They are supposed to have very similar general characteristics from a demographic standpoint, from a whatever training history standpoint, whatever it is, whatever variables we're kind of looking at, we want them to be very similar. And then you apply a intervention to one group, and then you have some sort of control on the other group. And so hopefully there's placebo in place. So that way nobody knows which group they're actually in. You do preliminary testing and you do end testing, and you see what the outcomes were. And hopefully everybody's blind to who was in what group as they go through all of that data. So that's the highest quality individual study we could have, is an experimental study or randomized control trial. Then we have quasi-experimental, which is essentially could be the same thing as a randomized control trial, except it's not randomized or something along those lines. Then you have observational studies. These are like cohort studies where you take two groups of people who have mostly self-selected into these different groups. And so it might be people who have reported taking creatine for the last 10 years and people who have not reported taking creatine for the last 10 years. And then you look at their outcomes. Are they more likely to have kidney dysfunction? Are they more likely to get muscle hypertrophy? Are they more likely, whatever it is, whatever the outcomes of interest we are. Then we have case studies. These are just individual specific people that we follow. If we're just having an N of 1, that does matter. N of 1 does matter because at the end of the day, this all comes down to the individual, but you can't draw the same conclusions from an N of 1 study, a case study, that you can otherwise. And the last one would just be expert opinion, where we don't have any data whatsoever. We just have an expert opinion. So running those back, highest quality is systematic review and meta-analysis. Then we go randomized control trials or experimental studies, and quasi-experimental studies, observational studies, case studies, expert opinion. That's what we want to look for. Those are the type of studies we want to look for in that order.
Got it. I actually, in the research for this episode, without knowing any of that, pulled a systematic review with meta-analysis on the effects of creatine supplementation combined with resistance training on regional measures of muscle hypertrophy. Which I don't know about you, but that sounds like some light Sunday afternoon reading to me. So,
dude, this stuff fires me up, man. This is I just downloaded all these PDFs into my Kindle and was doing some highlighting along the way. But I actually want to dive deep on that because the study that I am going off of, I wanted to find the seminal studies and things that were the biggest pivot points. My study's from 2003, and some people might look at that and be like, "I'm not going to look at research from 2003. I need something that's newer." I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to bet that your study is from the last 5 years. Am I correct?
2023.
Okay, yeah. So you have a very recent study. I have a not so recent study, and there's a good reason for that. The study that I found is the seminal study. It's kind of the one that is, I don't want to say the gold standard, but it was the one that kind of shaped the field and the knowledge base for where we are today. It's called Effective Creatine Supplementation on Body Composition and Performance, a meta-analysis. The lead author was John David Branch, and so this is a more broad question. It looks at creatine supplementation on body comp and performance. And it gave us a very clear picture of where we're at. It gave us a very clear understanding. So the question of what creatine supplementation does for body comp and performance as a general question has already been very well established and very well understood since 2003. Obviously, it's getting more mainstream. But what's not going to happen is researchers aren't going to go out there and answer the same question over and over and over and over and over again from a general standpoint. And so what you'll find in more recent literature is stuff that you found, which is more niche in the question that they ask. And that's still very worthwhile research when we want to look at it. But yours looks at the combined effects of creatine supplementation and resistance training. So kind of a two-factor or a two-arm independent variable there. And then it looks at specific outcomes. So muscle hypertrophy, and I'm assuming the muscle hypertrophy they looked at is on very specific muscle groups as well.
Yep. So breaking down this study a little bit more, we're looking at the knee extensor muscle, and this, I can't lie, the reason I chose this one, bicep brachii, tricep brachii, quadricep femoralis, and hamstrings and gastrocnemius. And then we also look into the elbow flexor and elbow extensor muscles.
All right. So basically, you wanted to see if some creatine is going to help you get some guns.
I mean, hey, that's the reason to take it, right? Help me get dumb, stupid, swole.
Dumb, stupid, swole. Yes, absolutely. Okay. So I'm going to work through the study, the seminal study here, and we're going to go three main questions we have when we look at these studies. First question we have when we look at a study is, can I trust the results? We already established it's a systematic review, and so that puts it high in the category, high in the hierarchy of studies. If you read through the methods, you read through the process. It's a very systematized approach. The meta-analyses, the methods are good. You can trust this study. It was performed without significant bias. There's no real reason to question the results of this study. So internal validity is high. The second thing we're going to look at is, what are the results? And so this one was a little bit interesting because I've never looked at the seminal study before. I've just gone off of what all the lead experts, because supplementation is more of a nutrition domain. I am a strength conditioning coach and physical therapist, and so I need to be aware of supplementation, but I haven't necessarily been as involved. Like I mentioned at the beginning, it's not where my heart is. I don't get as passionate about it, and so I've never looked at this study before. But the findings were very clear in a couple of different realms. The first being that, yes, without a shadow of a doubt, creatine supplementation has a positive performance or has a positive influence on body composition. So you're going to improve the amount of muscle mass that you have, and it's going to have a positive influence on your power-based outcomes. So muscle strength, power, sprint speed, it's going to have a positive influence on that. It does not have a positive influence on running or swimming performance. So basically, like, your endurance-based events are not influenced by creatine supplementation, which makes sense if we go back to our physiological understanding. Creatine is used in the phosphocreatine system that is used for short bouts of exercise. Your aerobic system is what you're going to use for longer duration, slow, steady endurance exercise. And that's going to be where you have all your Krebs cycle come in. You're taking your fats, oxidizing them, turning them into things that you can use for fuel. And so we're not concerned about, if you're supplementing with creatine with the sole goal of improving your Ironman performance this weekend, John, it's not going to be a worthwhile endeavor for you. It's probably not going to have positive outcomes.
Yeah, there's really no.
Thoughts so far?
Well, my initial thought is I'm hopefully at no point sprinting throughout the race. That would be bad. And kind of going
Don't
off
spread
of
at the
that,
end?
I think it's kind of more of like a enjoy the moment type of thing than a sprint.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm just saying. Um,
All right.
Playing off of that, a quote that I found from the International Society of Sports Nutrition, ISSN for their friends. The most effective ergonic nutritional supplement currently available to athletes in terms of increasing high intensity exercise capacity and lean body mass during training is creatine. So just kind of playing off of that, the thing's been around for forever. It works. Let's kind of jump into why, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll go back to the study that I was appraising here, because I left a little cliffhanger there where I was like, hey, it's great. It's great. It is. It is. It does absolutely improve performance, but the effect sizes are small. And so it's not something that's a make or break type of deal. You can take creatine, and I do encourage people who are trying to take peak performance to get every edge that they possibly can. Um, but the effect sizes and pretty much all of the studies we looked at were relatively small. So an effect size means, like, how big of an impact does this actually have? So it has an impact. Yes, that's the significance. That's what we see when we say there was a significant improvement. Significant does not mean large. Significant means it's a statistically significant difference. And so the p-value is less than 0.05 is the typical thing you're looking at when you look at significance. Um, so yeah, we had a statistically significant improvement in all of these metrics that we just talked about, but the effect size wasn't that big. So it's not like you're going to go from, if you start supplementing with creatine, you're not going to go from benching 135 to benching 205 4 weeks after supplementing with it. Like, it's going to help you, but it's not going to be a make or break type of deal. I do want to touch on the safety of it because this is something that people have concerns with. A lot of physicians are pretty behind on their research here. Guys, creatine is extraordinarily well studied. It's safe. There have been basically no studies that found any negative impact whatsoever on long-term health. There's some thoughts out there on if that it's going to mess up your kidneys. There is a basic misinterpretation of laboratory results and physiology whenever that is the case. And so what happens is the main metric that most physicians look at whenever they look at kidney function is something called creatinine. And so if you have elevated creatinine, that can be an indicator of kidney dysfunction. However, when you supplement with creatine, your creatinine also will elevate. So it's a false indicator of kidney dysfunction. So if you have elevated creatinine and you are somebody who takes creatine on a regular basis, I do encourage you to also ask your doctor to run a test for cystatin C, because that can be an unbiased metric where you don't have the same false indicator. So maybe this is a good time to say, absolutely none of this in these podcasts, newsletter, articles, social media, website, whatever it is, are to serve as medical advice for you or your athlete. Please see a qualified healthcare practitioner. These are for general educational purposes only. But I will go back and say that it is really common for people to be told they have kidney dysfunction whenever they have elevated creatinine levels while they're supplementing with creatine, but then they get a cystatin C test and their cystatin C comes back normal. Kidneys are perfectly fine. They're filtering everything perfectly fine. It's just the creatinine are also increased. The creatine increases the creatinine level, which is a false indicator of kidney dysfunction. I do always encourage anybody who has pre-existing kidney dysfunction, kidney disease, to talk to a nephrologist before they get on creatine, just because it's much better to be safe than sorry. But I've had plenty of mature athletes, so kids who are past their growth phase, who have gotten on creatine very safely. They have pre-existing kidney dysfunction. So it is safe, very well established, and is efficacious. It will improve performance, maybe not to the degree that we sometimes think. So it's significant, but maybe not the largest effect size. What are your thoughts there, John?
I think one more thing on the safety side, and something I've heard a lot about when talking with creatine, especially with like guys around my age, creatine is not something that's going to cause your hair to fall out. I know that that was something that gets talked about. I don't know why. So I kind of dove in here.
Really?
Yeah. There's a 2009 study, and I'm unsure if this is a systematic meta-analysis. So who knows how accurate this really is. But
Well, let's work through it here, John. Let's
yeah,
let's.
let's pull it
So
up.
what's your?
So
Yeah,
I
pull it
have the
up. This
study,
is good.
and we are looking at, this is from,
Can you share it on your screen by chance?
yeah, it's from 2009. So we passed the creatine being old test. So this dihydrotestosterone is something that is known to like cause this like hair loss. I don't know if you guys can tell, but this is something that I may have been looking into at one point in my life. So looking through the abstract here, the objective of this study was to look at the resting concentrations of these androgens that we talked about just above after 3 weeks of this creatine supplementation. And what we're really thinking about is that this ratio of this DHT to this T would change on this creatine supplementation, which has been quote unquote associated with hair loss. And that was kind of born from this study in 2009. As you can see, this double blind, placebo controlled, like we just talked about, seems to be legit. But the real hook here is that this study has not been repeated or replicated the results in the last, this is from 2009. So from 2009 to 2025, we have failed to repeat these same results, meaning that this is a study that, yeah, you can read and you can think, all right, creatine is going to make my hair fall out. But unless it's happened again over the last, 16 years, it's probably something you should take with a pretty big grain of salt.
Those are all good points there. And so, can you leave that study up for a second? Okay. So yes, you mentioned what type of study it is. This is an experimental study. So on our hierarchy of studies, it rates relatively highly, but there are a lot of other variables that go into the question of can I trust this study? So when you have a one-off study, You always want to make sure something's reproducible. That's in the field of psychology. We have a massive reproducibility crisis right now, where all this research that was originally done that we learned in our textbooks that has been taken as gospel for a long time is showing to be unreproducible, which means it was really just a one-off type of deal. So you were correct in that. Absolutely, that was a really good point, John. But then I mean, you have participants, college age rugby players, N of 20s. You've only got 20 people in this entire study. So we're making large scale conclusions off of 10 people in one group and 10 people in the other group. And this is a study that only lasted 21 days. So you don't supplement creatine only for 21 days. It's something that you take basically in perpetuity. And so this is something that is just a very small data point that you cannot draw any sort of large scale conclusions based off of this study. So the do I trust this study is relatively low, and we're not even looking at the methods. We don't have the full text pulled up right now, and we don't necessarily need to go through all that. But no, that's all good points. Working back to the seminal study, the third question here is a very, very important one. It's, can I use these results in my context? Meaning, does this apply to me and my situation? This is where we have not so much with the seminal study, because this podcast, this newsletter, everything here is all about athlete development, most specifically in the age ranges of 13 to 18 years old. Now, this is all adults. All of this research that we just talked about here has been done on full-grown adults. And so this is not adolescents that we're talking about. And you cannot treat adolescents just like many adults. They are going through very different things internally. They're going through very different processes. And so you have to have specific research. You have to the best of your ability, find research that is specific to the adolescent population. We have a very hard job being in this role, being in this setting, having to deal with adolescents, John. Do you know why that is?
Puberty.
Yes, that's something that's challenging. That's something that's a factor here. But when it comes to the literature itself, the hard part is that it's almost impossible to do research on adolescents who are non-consenting individuals, and no parent's going to be like, yeah, I want my kid to be the guinea pig. I want my kid to try that out. And so it's really hard to do research on adolescents. And so we have to always look for the best literature that we can find, but know that the literature is going to be pretty scarce. Did find a lit review that was pretty systematic in nature. They don't qualify it as a systematic review, but the process they outline for doing the lit review is pretty systematic. And so this was a 2023 study. The lead author, Gregory Metzger, Creatine Supplementation in the Pediatric and Adolescent Athlete, a literature review. The first thing I want to do, I want to go through those three questions. Number one, can I trust the results? I did the research for you here, guys. Yes, you can trust the results. It's a lit review that was systematic in nature. Again, it looks at studies, but the asterisk here, just like we talked about with John's limited sample size in his individual randomized control trial, we do not have a plethora of studies available. There are only a total of 13 articles that met the criteria to be included in this final review. So what did they find here whenever they looked at this? So what are the results? The next question. Big overall result, there's no consistent findings regarding creatine supplementation improvements in athletic performance in the adolescent and pediatric population. Okay, so as opposed to the adult population where it was very clear that there was a positive effect on athletic performance, this research didn't necessarily have the same finding at this point in time. Number two, poor quality research. It's just not high quality research that they're looking at here. So even though we have a systematic review, which is a high on the hierarchy, the overall underlying studies they're looking at aren't that high quality. And number three, and maybe the most important finding here, is that we don't have long-term data at all on the health risks or benefits of starting creatine supplementation in the adolescent years and then continuing it on throughout. And so we just don't have long-term data to say whether it is safe or it isn't. However, we do have a stance from the ISSN because we have a sparsity of literature in the adolescent population. We do have to make some conclusions based off of evidence from the adult population and then physiological understanding and expert opinion to be able to have some practical advice here. because we're not going to get very high quality literature on adolescence and supplementation at this point in time. So the ISSN stance that I would strongly agree with here is creatine supplementation is an acceptable nutrition strategy for younger athletes who are A, involved in serious competitive and supervised training, B, are consuming a well-balanced and performance-enhancing diet, C, are knowledgeable about appropriate use of creatine, and D, do not exceed recommended dosages. And so if you are somebody who is already super locked in on your diet, meaning that you are eating very high quality foods, you're hitting your protein numbers on a regular basis, you're hitting calories on a regular basis, you're getting your micronutrients on a regular basis, you've earned the right to move on and consider creatine supplementation. I would put another point there is if you are on at least on the back half of skeletal maturity, meaning you've gone through puberty, you're most of the way through puberty, you don't know that you're going to continue to grow. You might think, hey, I have a couple more inches in me. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. If you're at that point, I think it's okay to start taking creatine. If you're like, yeah, I'm definitely going to grow, I'm just waiting on my growth spurt, I'd probably advise against it. Just focus on your high quality diet because we don't have the literature to support it at this point in time. The long-term safety the long-term safety benefits. The more you look like an adult, feel like an adult, the physical maturity aspect of things, the safer it is for you to use. Is kind of the stance that I would hold at this point in time.
And I think that's a great takeaway for the entirety of this podcast is that you really can't out supplement poor diet, poor training, and poor sleep. So creatine definitely has its effect. It can be good. But if you're not someone who's already super locked in on hitting the weights really hard, hitting the field hard, and eating right, it's probably not something you need to focus on right now.
I couldn't agree more. It's like stepping over Franklin's to pick up Washington's, man. Like you're stepping over all the $100 bills to pick up $1 bills. Like why are you so concerned about creatine supplementation, which in the adult population, yes, it improves performance, but the effect size is small. It's not going to make or break you. When the effect size of eating all high quality protein and making sure that you are hitting all the numbers you need to hit from a nutrition standpoint has a huge effect size. And so you want a huge effect size or you want a small effect size. Focus on a huge effect size first. And then once you get to the back half of skeletal maturity, hey, maybe you've earned the right to start supplementing. Maybe you haven't. Before we close out this creatine thing, I do want to bring to light something that's newer in nature. These creatine gummies are becoming quite popular. A lot of people are taking creatine in gummy form. And there was a recent review where this agency tested all of these creatine gummies to see what their active levels of creatine were. And in almost, I'm pretty sure every creatine gummy form, there was no active creatine in the gummies because gummies are really, really hard to maintain active potent ingredients while you turn them into that gummy format. And so I would probably stay away from those. I'd probably stay away from gummy supplements in general because it's unless you have some sort of third party company that's tested it to say, hey, you know what, the actual amount of active ingredient is in there is appropriate. But yeah, so interesting little nugget because I know the gummy thing is getting way more popular. But I don't think creatine gummies are the future. It would definitely just stay away from them.
The traditional forms of creatine that you will see are creatine monohydrate in this micronized creatine form. And that is just, let me show the camera, yes, it's just powder. And so you add it to a cup of water, dilute it, or if you're just really in a rush, you just go straight, swish some water in your mouth. That's really it. There's nothing to it. But yeah, I think this is the most common form and the most effective form of actually administering the creatine. I don't think gummies are going to be a new thing anytime soon.
No, so creatine monohydrate is shown to be just as effective as any other form out there. So there's all these proprietary blends people will try to sell you. Don't buy into it. Like there's nothing that's just gonna straight up beat creatine monohydrate. Just get it unflavored. You add it to water. You have no idea it's there. Like it tastes like nothing. It's completely soluble. So 100% creatine monohydrate is it's cheap. It's effective. Don't overthink this one. You don't need some sort of special version of creatine in order to get your needs met. You're not going to get some sort of advantage there, despite what the marketing ploys are going to tell you. Everybody's going to try to market their proprietary blend because there's no regulation. That's why this stuff is so confusing for everybody, because the regulation does not exist. And there's a bunch of false claims out there and everybody's looking for that magic pill, and supplements just fall in this very unique area on the Venn diagram of all those different things where it hits all those boxes, checks all those boxes. And so it's this agency of confusion. But I know you have to get to class, John. I do not want to make you late for class.
Yeah, that'll not
And
be
so
good.
anything else to add?
No, I think we hit it all.
If you guys have any questions, feel free to shoot us an email at zach@gtperformance.co. Please like, share, subscribe, follow wherever you get this podcast. Please send it to your friends. Help us continue to grow it. And until next time, go be great out there.
Yeah, straight A student, but I'm friends with the cool kids. Following the rules and the rubric. Freestyle on the bus and it's too lit.